Welcome to this final session of the 2018 AgrAbility Virtual National Training Workshop. Our final webinar of the conference is on assistive technology for beekeeping, and we're pleased to have a longtime AgrAbility staff member, Ned Stoller, as our presenter today. For those who might not know me, I'm Paul Jones. I manage the National AgrAbility Project here at Purdue University. Our basic instructions, for those who may not have joined us, you do have options on your audio, and you can adjust those through the Communicate menu at the top left, adjust your volume, switch methods of connecting. If you have a need for closed captions, you may find those under the Multimedia Viewer on the right-hand column, and should be able to make adjustments to those. You may have to log in some basic information first. You can expand or contract any of the options on the right column with the arrows, and you can also expand or contract the entire right-hand column by dragging on the border. That might make the presentation window a little bigger if you want to try that. If you have questions from our presentation and you'd like to ask the presenter, you can either type those in the chat window. Please choose the option of sending to all panelists, and then make sure you submit that. Hit the submit button. Also, if you would like to ask a question verbally, you can plan to click on the raise hand icon during the question answer period at the end, and we will do our best to enable your microphone or phone connection to ask that question verbally. If you're concerned that you only see yourself as an attendee, that's because we've limited that list to help reduce bandwidth issues. Also, if there's more than one person viewing at your computer, we'd appreciate if you could let us know in the chat window also to help us with our attendance. We do have 4 quick survey questions at the end, and after everything is over, we'll plan to open a final poll that will allow you to share comments if you'd like to. The session is being recorded, and we are planning to archive that on our website, agrability.org, under the online training link. Simply go to the Virtual National Training Workshop sublink, and you should be able to find those recordings and PowerPoints, and we hope to get those up by the end of next week. If you have any problems with technical issues, please use the chat window to let us know about that, and if you're not able to do that, you can email me, jonesp@purdue.edu. For those who may not be familiar with AgrAbility, we are sponsored by the USDA's National Institute on Food and Agriculture, and we focus on issues of disability in agriculture. Every one of the AgrAbility projects is a partnership between one land-grant university and at least one nonprofit disability services organization. And currently there are 20 state projects around the country. There's also one national AgrAbility project, and that again, that's led by Purdue's Breaking New Ground Resource Center. Here at the national project, our partners include Goodwill of the Finger Lakes, APRIL, which is the Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living, Colorado State University, and also Washington State University. Feel free to check out more information at www.agrability.org. You can find out if your state has a program, an AgrAbility project, get contact information, view some of our archived webinars, and find an abundance of other resources, including the Toolbox Assistive Technology database, which has other assistive technology solutions in it also. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Ned Stoller, who will give the body of the presentation, and then we'll return at the end for the poll questions and also the question and answer session.
So I am the Assistive Technology Professional for Michigan AgrAbility, and you can see our clients are spread far and wide throughout the state of Michigan, Michigan State University Extension and Easter Seals, Michigan, are the partners in our state project. And I live, if I could show you my hand over here. That's our favorite thing to do in Michigan, is show our hand for a map of where we're at. So it's about a 9-hour or 10-hour drive to my farthest clients in the Upper Peninsula. And in the last summer, I had 4 new clients, all of them involved with beekeeping of some sort. And so that has spurred a lot of research and study regarding assistive technology for beekeepers. Assistive technology is simply an item or system to improve the functional capabilities of a person with a disability. So when we have a beekeeper and he's got tasks that he needs to do and is challenged to do it because of some medical condition, we are thinking about tools or systems to make him able or her able to do their work with the assistive technology provided. So the pictures here show basically the scope of beekeeping. The top right picture is honey from Bear Creek Organic Farm, and they have 20 hives. The picture on the bottom right is of his bee farms in southwest Michigan, and they have thousands of hives and haul them from Texas to Michigan and back again. So there's a huge scope in the beekeeping industry. We are talking more today about the sideline apiaries with 20 to 200 hives. It's going to be part-time, possibly full-time work. If you get up closer to 200 hives, it's for sure going to be full-time employment and could have quite large gross revenue. Of course, you have to take expenses out of that. But there is a lot of potential in the beekeeping industry with a commercial or a sideline apiary. So the revenue from beekeeping comes from renting out pollination hives. Here in Michigan, there's an abundance of fruit and vegetable growing operations, and they rely on bees for pollination. And so beekeepers will get paid by the fruit and vegetable growers to position hives near to their orchards and their vegetable fields. Bear Creek Organic Farm actually sells hive shares. People can basically adopt a hive and keep track of what's going on with their beehive and get a percentage of the honey from it. And then the majority of the sideline beekeepers are going to be at the farmers markets, online stores, maybe some wholesale to local retail outlets and online sales as well. So this is our target audience of people that we're going to be thinking about assistive technology for. And for those who are not familiar with beekeeping, just a few terms here. We're going to start out with the hive body. It is what looks like a box to you. And stacks of hive bodies together make up the hive. Inside the hive body are frames, either 8 or 10 frames per hive, and they hang down into the hive bodies. And the frames might have wires stretched between them. They might have a piece of a sheet of plastic there for the bees to build their honeycomb on with their wax, or it might just be the wax that the bees produce themselves. So these are where the honey is going to be collected by the bees, and all of the weight of the honey is inside these hive bodies. You can see the picture on the right with the stack of hive bodies. Some of the hive bodies are shallow, some are medium, and some are deep in their shape, and we're going to talk about that some more later. There's a cover on top to keep out the weather. There's an entrance opening in the bottom, and then there's a bottom board that the whole hive will sit on. So this is what we're talking about when we refer to hive bodies and frames. Successful beekeepers spend a lot of time inspecting their hives. They're watching for pests. They, in the late fall and the winter time, might be feeding their hives sugar water to keep the bees alive through a cold winter. They might be checking to see how much honey is collecting on the frames. They might be looking for the queen bee. They might be looking to see if the bees are getting ready to swarm, in which case they might want to split the hive and take some of the bees and start another hive. And so it's a regular activity to be opening up the hives, lifting off the cover, lifting off hive bodies. Maybe every single hive body gets lifted off as the beekeeper inspects the frames, looking for the honey and see how much honey is available for overwintering. So there's a lot of lifting. And as you can imagine, if you're renting out hives to fruit and vegetable growers, you're going to have hives in all kinds of terrain, the backsides of people's fields and orchards. There's a lot of lifting of these hive bodies that might weigh up to 90 pounds when they're full of honey. And then a lot of manual dexterity with the fingers and hands, both gripping the handles on the sides of the hive bodies and prying out the frames. The bees produce a material called propolis, which is kind of like glue. And they'll glue everything in that hive body together. They'll glue the hive bodies to each other. They'll glue the frames to the hive body. They'll glue the frames to each other. And so there's a lot of prying and tight gripping needed to pull those frames out of the hive bodies and open up the hives. Physical challenges faced by beekeepers. As you can imagine, there's a lot of arthritis. There's some repetitive motion injuries, back injuries, arthritis and musculoskeletal injuries from the heavy labor and the regular work. Bending down and lifting heavy boxes, heavy hive bodies, stacking them, gripping tools to pry the hive bodies apart, just getting to the back 40 where the hives are, and gripping the small handles on the sides. So if you can imagine a beekeeper with a mobility impairment trying to, first of all, get to his hives, then get down on hands and knees to inspect hives, or to be balancing while lifting the hive bodies that might be heavy, grasping those frames and pulling them out. So people with impaired grip, back impairments, arm strength you really need two good strong arms to grab onto those hive bodies. Those are the impairments that we're going to be talking about. This is a summary of the assistive technology. We're going to talk about some ergonomics. We're going to talk about lifting hives, assistive technology, hand tools, bee yard mobility. That's getting around in the bee yard once you get there. Beehive Access is longer distance mobility to get to the bee yard in the first place. And then the workshop and the honey room, extracting the honey from the hives, from the comb. So we're going to begin with some ergonomics, and this is a demonstration by Adam Ingrao. He is a farmer veteran here in Michigan. He is a beekeeper. He teaches veterans how to do beekeeping. He does research on honeybees and does custom beekeeping for other farms. He's demonstrating here that bending motion and lifting and twisting, very awkward position. And so if at all possible, to come up with assistive technology to get those hives up off of the ground. Here, this beekeeper in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan has his stool that he sits on so that he's not standing the whole time that he's inspecting his hives. He has built himself a 2x4 frame that's set up on cement blocks. And so this raises the whole hive 12 to 16 inches up off of the ground. Then when he uncovers the hive and lifts the hive bodies off, he can set those hive bodies on the 2x4 frame right in front of him and sit there in a comfortable position on his stool and inspect the hive. When he lifts the frames out of the hive body, they actually can sit right on his 2x4 structure that he built. He made sure that it was the same dimensions as the hive bodies, so he doesn't have frames laying all over the place, but they hang down quite nicely inside that 2x4 construction he made. If you look at the beekeeper to the right, how he is bent over in that awkward position, and think about what could he do instead of bending over like that at the waist to inspect his hive. Where might he set that hive body to inspect it more comfortably? You notice right behind him there's another beehive. He could lift that hive body and set it onto the beehive behind him and do his inspection from a much more comfortable position if he wasn't going to use a stool. And so a lot of ergonomics is a way of thinking as much as assistive technology or equipment per se. With ergonomics and beekeeping, resting the joints, doing any one thing for too long is going to be a challenge and create that pain in the joints in the back. And so alternating positions frequently, sitting down on a stool, alternating tasks. If there's a lot of hive bodies that need to be lifted and moved, and there's also some work that needs to be done that's more tedious, like looking for a queen, split up the work, do part of the lifting now and part of it later, do part of the inspections now and part of it later. And just thinking about the proper workstation height as much as possible, just to get those frames and hive bodies up in a more comfortable position and not leave yourself. It's an ergonomic principle as much as possible to have your regularly used tools and items within 17 inches of your body, and especially not reaching far away from your body, lifting a heavy load. So these are just a few ergonomic principles. Ergonomics in of itself is a whole field of study that could be applied to beekeeping, but I thought that this 2x4 frame set up on cement blocks was a great accommodation to improve the ergonomics and just plain sitting down on a stool. The issue that you might run into by setting the hives up on an elevated platform is if you have a shoulder impairment, now you have to reach higher to lift the top hive body on and off of the hive. So if someone has a rotator cuff injury and lost range of motion in their shoulders, raising the hives up too high might create another challenge. And that's something we need to pay attention to when we're doing our assistive technology recommendations, is just to be careful that we don't cause other challenges by the assistive technology that we recommend. So another ergonomic simple solution that is talked about significantly at bushfarms.com. This website has multitudes of good information on beekeeping and doing it in a healthy way, but simply to make the hive bodies less heavy. If we can reduce the number of frames in a hive body from 10 to 8, that's a 20% reduction in the weight of a hive that's full of honey. If someone has lots and lots of hives already, to reduce or rebuild all of those boxes might be expensive. However, it might also be an option to simply use shallow or medium hive bodies instead of the deeps. You can see the significant difference in the shape of those hive bodies, and you might reduce the weight from 90 pounds with a deep hive body full of honey all the way down to 50 to 55 pounds or even less if you're using a shallow hive body. An interesting side point about reducing the weight of the hives. In the grape harvesting industry in California, they reduced the size of their picking tubs from 56 pounds to 48 pounds. And it resulted in a 50% reduction in musculoskeletal injuries just by decreasing it 8 pounds in weight from that repetitive lifting. So this really is a significant improvement for someone who's a beekeeper, just to use lighter weight equipment if at all possible. And definitely if somebody's starting out and they have some kind of a medical condition, definitely start out with new equipment that is both 8-frame and shallow hive bodies if at all possible. So now we're going to talk about moving the hives around. So beekeeping is very complex, it's very scientific, and moving the hives might disrupt the bees. But there are times of the year when the bees are dormant, and maybe the hives are going to be, excuse me, hives are going to be moved from one bee yard to another, maybe rented to a different grower than before. So we need to lift and move the whole hive at once. The handhold dolly shown on the left comes from manlakeltd.com, and it's in the $500 range. It has clips on each side that straddle the beehive. Basically, the user pushes it in, the clips engage the handholds, tilt it back, and the whole hive can be moved without lifting the individual hive bodies, saving someone's back and their arms if they're not able to grip and lift. The fork hand truck shown on the right is available at handtrucksrus.com, and it's like a fork truck, but you have to make sure that if you're going to use this to move the hives, that the hives are up on cleats. You can see the hive in the picture here in the middle is set up about an inch off the ground on some cleats so that this hand fork truck could be pushed right under there, tilted back, and move the hive wherever you would like. So the fork hand truck is in the $300 range. And some beekeepers in hotter climates will have a vented bottom board on their beehive that lets air flow up through the hive and out the top. The bees generate a lot of energy, a lot of heat just from their body activity. In very cold climates, the bees will keep their hives in the upper 60s, maybe all the way up to 90 degrees throughout the summer, and throughout the winter, I mean. So in hot climates, having a vented bottom board is just a screen that lets the air up through it. If you have a vented bottom board, you cannot use that fork hand truck, or you're going to punch the screen out of the bottom of your hive. In that case, you would want to use the hand dolly shown on the left. This is a 2-person hive lift, and on each side where the workers are lifting, there's a little tab on the hive lifter that grips the handholds in the side of the hive body. And then the strap holds the entire hive together in a unit. If 2 people wanted to lift, they could separate this hive body or this hive at any level that they chose if they didn't have that strap on there. So whereas before we were talking about moving the whole hive, this unit here is less than $100. It's available at Brushy Mountain Bee Farms, and it's a pretty low cost accommodation. If you have 2 people working together, you split the load in half. You don't have to grip those small handholds with your hands. You could even loop an elbow underneath this two-person hive carrier if you didn't have hands to grip with. And so it's really a nice accommodation for very low cost if you have two people working together in a partnership, with quite often on a farm that is the case. So this should definitely be something to look at pretty seriously for a beekeeper with a medical condition. This is an individual hive body lift. It's called the Kaptar lift. It comes out of Hungary. It's in the $3,000 range. It can either be hand cranked or electric lift. The operator rolls it up to a hive on the two wheels, tilts it forward, and then there are gripping pads on the side with an over-center locking mechanism. So it's kind of like brake pads on a car that just squeeze real tight, and they'll pinch the hive body at whatever level you want. And so here Adam is demonstrating how he can lift two hive bodies off of the bottom one by engaging the clamp, tilting it back, and then cranking it up. He's now able to see right into that bottom hive body without doing any lifting by hand. The nice thing also is, notice how he can elevate those hive bodies with the Kaptar lift, and he can stand in an upright position and inspect the frames and the honey from a very ergonomically correct position. So the only supplier on this side of the Atlantic Ocean is Country Fields in Canada, and they have both options, the electric and the hand-cranked Kaptar lift. The only drawback of this machine, well, one drawback is the cost of it. The other is that the dolly wheels are very narrow, close together, and Adam reported that it's a little bit tippy if you're moving hives or hive bodies on a side hill. You can use this to lift the whole hive. Those clamps will clamp very tightly to lift the entire hive if desired. So Adam and I are actually studying this and thinking about how to add dual wheels on to increase the stability of this. But it is a very good, very useful machine. If you do some research for beehive lifts, you'll find that there's a lot of technology in Europe. Beekeeping is very much a artisan, family pride, hand-down heirloom enterprise in Europe. And there's a lot of very useful equipment from Europe for that purpose. It just costs a little more because we have to get it across the ocean to the U.S. So here we have a do-it-yourself version of that. It can be found on YouTube, and I have created a playlist on the Michigan AgrAbility YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and do a search for Michigan AgrAbility and go look at our playlists, you will find one for beekeeping. I'm not famous enough on YouTube to get my own YouTube channel name, but if everybody on the call here goes and follows Michigan AgrAbility on YouTube, maybe I can get to that stage, become famous, and then we can shorten it up to youtube.com/Michigan AgrAbility, and our playlist will be a lot easier to find. But you can see the concept here is the same as with the Kaptar lift, except it starts out with a two-wheel material handling dolly, and then there's a steel frame welded onto that with a boat winch that goes over a pulley at the top of the steel frame. The cable from the boat winch goes down and hooks onto a couple of grip arms that slide up and down on that steel frame. And the picture at left shows the grip arms squeezed against the side of the beehive. There's a couple of tabs on those grip arms that engage the handholds of the hive body. And then a woodworker's clamp is tightened to hold those grip arms securely against the sides of the beehive. The boat winch is then cranked to raise the load, and this could be used to inspect at any level of the beehive. Any one of the hive bodies could be lifted with this at a separate time. And once again, you gain the ergonomics of the Kaptar lift of being able to inspect your hive at a comfortable level. So I'd encourage you to watch these YouTube videos at the Michigan AgrAbility YouTube channel, Beekeeping Playlists. You'll get some good ideas and be able to watch this in action. Here we have some more concepts for lifting beehives. There's a large crane on a semi-truck shown on the left. I just put that there to show you what a commercial beekeeper would be using. Very large truck, very large crane that could lift pallets with 4 to 8 beehives all at one time and stack them on the semi. That's not the kind of situation we're looking at most. But here on the right, we see some pickup truck style jib cranes that are available at northerntool.com or Granger, or really any industrial tool website is going to have cranes that can go in the bed of a pickup truck. And to mount those on the side of a utility vehicle, to mount one of those on the side of a small trailer, or even on the bed of a pickup truck, and they would have a cable that would hang down. The cost of this homemade lift here that was on YouTube, I figure it's probably about $600 to buy the materials and hire somebody in a shop to fabricate it. These cranes are going to be in probably the $400 or less range to lift with a cable. The challenge of using a cable winch crane to lift beehives is how do you get that cable to grab onto a beehive without tipping the hive over, and then lift it and swing it over onto your trailer or your utility vehicle or your pickup truck. So there are some homemade versions. The one on the left is used, this is for a Wari hive that has larger handles on the sides. The Wari hives might be a good option for someone that has a hand grip strength impairment because there's larger grabs on the sides of the hives. For that matter, additional larger grip blocks could be attached to the Longsworth hives as well. That's the standard hive that we've been looking at already. But basically, with a crane cable hive lifting tongs, what we have to have is the tongs where the cable is attached to the tongs needs to be centered directly above the center of the hive. What this does is when the cable is pulled and the hive is lifted, it keeps that hive vertical, hanging straight up and down below the cable. So if the cable is pulling to one side or the other, it's going to tip the hive sideways, and you're going to have disaster. So the hive lifting tongs shown in the middle, I put the picture there to show the concept. They are not available at this time, but it is a good design and system that might work. It would have to be custom fabricated. The Easy Dual Changer from BeermanSales.com shown on the right, that's a picture of gripping tongs that are used for moving large, heavy dual tractor wheels. So they're designed to handle lots and lots of weight, far more than a beehive would weigh. And with the shape of those tongs, they would be able to reach down and grip and lift at least 3 of the hive bodies off of a hive at once. And the cost of those tongs is $360. Probably overkill as far as strength is concerned, but if you didn't want to custom fabricate your own lifting tongs, this scissors type shape, when it's pulled from the top, it squeezes at the bottom and will engage the handholds of your beehives for lifting the hive. So that might be a lower cost option depending on how much your custom fabricator would charge you to build a set of hive lifting tongs. But this is a necessary part of the crane. So if you're thinking of going with the crane option, which is nice because it's on your mobility cart, it goes with you where you go. You can lift the hive directly on, load and unload, but you do have to consider the challenge of custom building a set of hive lifting tongs to go with your crane. Now we're going to look at some hand tools. The picture on left shows that it's a fairly shallow indentation in the side of the Longsworth hive for gripping and picking up the hives. Screwing on some 2x4 blocks would give you 1.5 inches of grip at each end of the hive body. The pry bar that you see in the beekeeper's hand on the right is a pretty standard tool. It's used to pop the frames loose from the hive bodies to break the propolis seal. But it can be a small tool and hard to grip. So this shows some different options. At the bottom right, we'll look at that picture first, the 14-inch giant hive tool from betterbee.com. That tool gives you 14 inches of pry bar strength. So the longer your hand tool, the less forces you have to use to pry out those frames or to break the hive bodies apart. The chisel tool, available from chiseltool.com, is $25. It's a little bit more ergonomic of shape, and it is also a very useful long-handled tool to pop apart the frames. The frame grip shown at the bottom is a gripping tool to grab a hold of the frames and lift them out, but you have to be sure to break the propolis seal first so that you don't pull the frames apart by using that frame grip tool. But betterbee.com is a good option for many beekeeping tools, particularly these ergonomic tools. And then on the left is the Grippy's glove. It is a Velcro glove. You put the glove on your hand, grip onto your tool, pull the Velcro strap around your fingers and stick it to where your knuckles are at. And this forces your hand to stay in a fist without you exerting forces. So if someone has repetitive motion injuries in their wrists or any kind of a hand impairment, these Grippy's gloves are going to be very useful to keep the hand in a tight fist without straining those muscles and those joints. These are very simple, basically zero-cost accommodations. Anytime someone has arthritis in their hands or a grip impairment, adding some pipe foam insulation, as is shown here on this chisel, it makes a larger diameter handle and a softer gripping surface. This pipe foam insulation can be purchased, like 3 feet of it, for $1 at Menards or Lowe's or any hardware store. And then the picture on the left simply shows a wooden block keeping the hive bodies separated, because that propolis is so sticky that sometimes you can prop apart one side of the hive body, and when you go to pry the other, it's already stuck back together where you started. And so certainly not doing things twice is going to be a great accommodation that doesn't cost anything, So pry your hive bodies apart, stick a wood block in to keep them apart, and then pry the other side. Bee yard mobility. We're just looking here at the surfaces around the beehives. The gravel option around the beehives to keep the weeds down and make a level surface is going to be in the $800 range, depending on the size of your bee yard to haul in the gravel. The weed fabric that's used in greenhouses is shown on the left. It's going to be more in the $250 range. It'll keep the weeds down and just help with the tripping hazards that tall grass would cause. The Cadillac option is to pour concrete pathways and have your bees on concrete or a hard packed driveway, but that's not always an option, especially as shown here on the right. If anybody's wondering why there's electric fence around the beehives, it's to keep the bears out, because it's not just a cartoon thing that bears like honey. So in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the beekeepers have to fence off their hives, and you can see what a trip hazard this tall, thick grass would be around those hives for someone with limited mobility. So the greenhouse weed fabric would be a very nice accommodation here to help with that mobility around the bee yard. Getting to the beehives, we already saw one picture of the utility vehicle with the crane on it for long distance mobility, and an ATV that's outfitted with racks and storage frames that you could carry if you were going to feed the hives or treat them. Maybe even a plow blade for pushing snow out of the way to get out there and check. As you can see the ATV on the right. A weed sprayer to keep the weeds down, but you're going to want to be careful with chemicals around your bees. But really, we're talking a lot about using ATVs and utility carts, or having a driveway that you can get a pickup truck or vehicle right out to your bee yard. The picture on the right is an electric material handling cart from Northern Tool. It's $2,200, but it's a 24-volt walk-behind cart that is powered. So if someone has the ability to walk and they feel better walking than riding, this is an option to get across rough terrain, and it can carry hives, it can carry supplies, all sorts of things. You can see the utility vehicle with the crane in the middle for hauling items. And then the picture on the left is one of my low-cost go-to solutions. And I got this idea from the grocery store, because I noticed how people with mobility impairments in the grocery store are always leaning on their grocery cart. And I started asking farmers around Michigan, what do you do at the grocery store to get groceries? And they say, I lean on the shopping cart. So these greenhouse carts from Amazon or any greenhouse supply are $200 or less. They have large wheels that can roll over rough terrain. They can carry loads. You could pile all of your tools on them. You could hang tools around the edges to make it easy to get at. You can use the top surface for setting the longstreth hives on, or the hive bodies when you're inspecting them. So there's just a lot of really nice, comfortable uses for one of these carts for somebody to lean on, to use for an outdoor walker. So I encourage you to consider that for a low-cost mobility option. Now we're going to move into the workshop. We're talking about some pretty basic workshop accommodations: the adjustable height seat and adjustable height table. Just do it. It's amazing how ergonomically correct you can do almost any job if you have an adjustable height table and an adjustable height seat. Because if you've got a stack of hive bodies on that cart in your shop and you're working on them for some reason, you can simply pump that table up and down into a comfortable position. Or if you're working on something down low, sit on your stool, give your knees a break. You can see the floor cushions in the bottom right picture. Standing on hard concrete is very painful for hips and knees and feet and ankle bones and people's back. It's a low-cost accommodation and certainly recommend it. And then I'm going to talk about the heater last, but it might be one of the most important accommodations for people that have arthritis and musculoskeletal injuries. You hear people talk about, oh, I can feel the weather's changing. We have the humidity. But not only that, when you're working with honey, you've heard about somebody being as slow as molasses in January. Well, guess what? When honey is cold, it's thick and it moves slow too. So having a heated shop, if you're trying to clean things up and you're working with water, or just in your honey room. Okay, here is a picture of workstations. When you're 6 years old, getting down on your hands and knees and putting together some frames is no big deal. But when you're 66 years old or 76 or 86, having your stool to sit on and your proper work height, I just wanted to show these two workstations, because when we're in a hurry, our farm shop ends up looking like the one on the left with a lot of different things in it, a lot of clutter. We might actually have our ergonomic workbench covered up with tools and pieces and parts, and we get down on our hands and knees and work on the floor. So just some real basics about being organized, putting tools away, and keeping your workbench cleared so you can actually use it. It doesn't cost a penny. It takes some organization, but it is assistive technology. Remember, we said the assistive technology is not just tools, but it's also systems that can make things accessible. Here's a picture of a cluttered workbench on the left and a nice workbench on the right, where the tools are easily reached down at a lower level. The surface is cleared. Here he can't roll his wheelchair underneath this workbench, but he has other tables in his shop that are. Just compared to the workshop on the left that has saw blades and supplies up at a high level, someone in a wheelchair would not be able to reach up and grab those supplies. They're farther than 17 inches away. So we're looking at ergonomics here in the workshop to improve accommodations. This is a picture of a tool balancer. Global Industrial sells this whole table setup, and the legs are adjustable height on the table for different users. The frame across the top holds the tool balancer, which is a spring-loaded cable that supports the weight of a heavy tool. So if you're working all day putting in screws with an impact driver or using a heavy tool, this will balance that weight. So this is another nice workshop accommodation from Global Industrial that I would encourage someone, if they're going to be doing a lot of repairs and maintenance at a workbench, to get a tool balancer and a overhead trolley system for it, to be able to relieve the strain on the hands and shoulders and elbows. The honey room, this is where putting a heater in the corner is going to be really important. This is where we are spinning the frames. We pull the frames out of the hive bodies and bring them in here. The bees, after they fill the comb with honey, will seal the comb off with a cap. That cap needs to be cut off so that the honey can fly out of the comb. The person working in the middle there is using a heated knife from datant.com, and all of these websites, betterbee.com and Great Lakes General Store, are going to be suppliers, as well as many others. The heated knife obviously just cuts through like a hot knife through butter, except it's a hot knife through honeycomb. and it opens up the comb. You put it into a spinner that spins the frames, and it flings the honey out of the frames and catches it in a large pot. That's what the picture on the left is of. And then the honey comes out a valve in the bottom and can be put into bottles. They make a hand spinner. It's a lot of work. If you have much more than 1 or 2 hives and have a medical condition, you're probably not going to want to be cranking and cranking and cranking on a hand spinner for hours. Some people will put a cordless drill on to run their honey extractor. But there's a lot of beekeeping clubs and organizations that will have the extraction equipment, and you can take your hives there or your frames there or rent the equipment, and that would be encouraged. But otherwise, it'll be about a $1,000 investment to get a small commercial extractor that spins the frames and a heated knife. I think the heated knife is in the $100 range. So the picture on right is a beekeeper sitting down in his heated honey room where he can extract the honey and bottle it from a seated position. So in summary, we have gone through ergonomics, lifting the hives, using hand tools, getting around the bee yard, getting to the bee yard, doing repairs and maintenance in the workshop, and honey extracting. And we have some estimated costs here, lifting the hives up to $5,000, but really for much less than that, you can probably accommodate. The hand tools, you can see these are not high cost situations. Bee yard mobility, for even paving a small bee yard with concrete, you might be up into the $3,000 range. Beehive Access, I put $10,000 there. A Kawasaki Mule, 4-wheel drive, reasonable accommodation for outdoor mobility. And then we have the workshop accommodations and the honey extracting. So, in conclusion, assistive technology in the apiary can really improve the likelihood of success for a beekeeper. It's a very satisfying, interesting enterprise, and it can generate really significant income for those that do it well and manage well. The problem is if you don't have the assistive technology and you can't do it well, beekeeping is going to be a failure. It's a science, and it takes a lot of work to do it. So you're better off getting the accommodations to prevent that failure from the start. So thank you. That's my last slide, and I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ned. I definitely learned some things. Much of that I didn't know at all. So, yeah, it's very, very helpful.
I do not know the answer to that question. I'm sorry.
Can you also read the question for those that might be just calling in?
How much do orchardists pay to have beehives moved to their orchards? I am not sure of that question.
We did get a comment in the chat window that said $160 a hive from one of our participants just now, so if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you, whoever gave that information. Since beekeeping might not be a primary source of employment, are you finding that VR will pay for the assistive technology? And it's part of a whole farm system, and so I have several clients that Michigan Rehab Services is paying for assistive technology. It's part of their livestock. They have cattle, they have bees, and other enterprises, and it goes together. So it probably depends on your state, how the voc rehab works. But here we've been successful in Michigan. What is the best Or suitable food for bees. I heard that regular white sugar is bad for them. I've heard that if you have 6 beekeepers together in a room and you ask them a question like this, you'll get 12 opinions. So I'm not even going to try. Have you run into any beekeeping co-ops or clubs where some of these types of AT could be shared? Down in Ann Arbor, Michigan, there's a beekeeping club. I know in Kalamazoo, Michigan, there's a beekeeping club. It would be a matter of checking in your specific location and doing a search for beekeepers in your town to find that information specifically. Are there any organizations that can help a veteran get equipment? Well, the Farmer Veteran Coalition has done that in Michigan, and I think based on the other presentations, the one we heard this morning about the VA programs for helping businesses get up and going, those are good options. I would recommend you contact the National AgrAbility and talk to Cindy Chastain about those options. Okay. Thank you.
Ned, we did have a couple more that came in after the other ones were put in. At least one question here. And one comment that regular white sugar is great for them. And this question, is there a map that follows bees so that this person would know the best state to start a beehive? Any kind of tracking system that you know of?
I do not know of a tracking system, but I do know that beekeepers do this work in almost every climate. The ancient Egyptians did in the deserts. People do in the north and the south, all across the United States. So I really think it's a good opportunity wherever you're at, if there are flowers and pollen that nectar can be gathered. So.
I think perhaps the question was actually a way to follow, to track where bee businesses are. Have you run into any kind of literature or websites that might list businesses where people have beekeeping or honey making businesses?
I don't know the answer to that either. As far as finding a local beekeeper, I do know that beekeepers love to help each other and to talk together. And so if you can find a beekeeping community in your area, you're pretty likely going to get some support for that. But I don't know right off the top of my head I wouldn't be able to point you to a map. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you again, Ned. I think that's the end of our questions. I'm on now? Okay. Thank you to everybody that's participated this afternoon, and also for those that have participated in the rest of the web conference. Again, we will plan to get the archives up soon, and we'll let you know about future events. So we wish you a good day, and thank you again.